You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply misunderstood by people who had no language for your depth. They called you dramatic because they couldn't hear your storm. They called you distant because they couldn't feel your silence. But you were trying to stay alive in rooms that called your truth a burden. You were decoding chaos while they accused you of creating it. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply misunderstood by people who had no language for your depth. They called you dramatic because they couldn't hear your storm. They called you distant because they couldn't feel your silence. But you were trying to stay alive in rooms that called your truth a burden. You were decoding chaos while they accused you of creating it. You begged to be seen by the blind. You offered softness to the hardened. You gave explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. That's the absurdity. You were building bridges while they burned maps. You turned your heart into a home and let in visitors who only wanted a vacation. And when they left, you blamed the foundation. But it was never your fault the guest didn't know how to stay. You shaped yourself to be palatable, to be pleasing, to be chosen. You softened every edge, muted every color. But even then, they still didn't stay. So you learned it wasn't about being lovable. It was about them not knowing how to love. And there's a difference. A brutal, liberating difference. They didn't reject you. They rejected the parts of you they couldn't control, the honesty that was too raw, the sensitivity that exposed their coldness. They said you were too intense because you made them feel too much. You weren't overwhelming, you were revealing. And revelation scares the ones hiding behind masks. You sat in rooms trying to explain your soul to people who didn't even understand their own. You tried to shrink your grief into bite-sized stories to make it easier for them to digest. But your pain was never meant to be palatable. It was meant to be witnessed. And when they turned away, you mistook their avoidance for your failure. But not everyone deserves access to your truth. They taught you early. Don't be too loud. Don't cry too much. Don't ask questions. You learned to twist yourself into silence, into shape, into shadows. And now, as an adult, you're still trying to prove your worth in rooms that taught you to disappear. But listen closely. That child inside you, they were never wrong. They were just never protected. You wore shame like a second skin, thinking if you just became better, quieter, smaller, they'd finally understand you. But the truth is brutal. You could have turned into anything, and it still wouldn't have made them see you, because their blindness wasn't about you, it was about them. And your healing begins when you stop trying to prove your worth to people who were never meant to hold it. You blamed yourself for how others mishandled you. Isn't that absurd? You turned rejection into proof of your unworthiness, when it was only proof of their limitations. You doubted your brilliance because it didn't fit their preference. But now you know their misunderstanding wasn't your mistake. You broke yourself into pieces, thinking love was earned through self-erasure. You became the girl who never said no, the woman who stayed too long, the soul who settled for fragments. But now, you're collecting the pieces. You're remembering the original shape. You're learning that true love will never ask you to vanish. You don't have to chase clarity from people committed to confusion. You don't have to apologize for needing softness, or being sensitive, or asking for reciprocity. You are not a project to be fixed. You are not a lesson to be learned. You're a poem, a prayer, a presence. And one day, someone will read you and not flinch. You were always enough. Not after the healing, not after the glow up, not after the therapy, but even in the brokenness, in the confusion, in the trembling silence. Even when you were misunderstood, you were enough. It wasn't about being too much. It was about being more than they could understand. And now, you don't need to convince anyone. You just need to remember. You were never lost, only unseen. You were never wrong, only in the wrong room. You were always enough. And now, you believe it. And that changes everything.